Welcome to the Industry 4.0 Club's Fireside Chat. The club's purpose is to engage the power of diverse worldwide talent to accelerate the global evolution to Industry 4.0. We accomplish this by hosting and supporting respectful, thoughtful, and interdisciplinary open conversations and creating quality content on wide-ranging Industry 4.0 topics to support and expand the reach of our community. My name is Mike Ungar, and I am the CEO of the club. I have over 40 years of leadership and manufacturing experience, most of that with Michelin. I'm joined today by my co host, Mike Yost. Mike, welcome. Would you mind introducing yourself a little bit, please?
Not a problem at all. Thank you, Mike. Welcome, everybody. As Mike said, my name is Mike Yost. I am one of the co-founders of the club, the volunteer chairman, and Mike's co-host here on these regular fireside chats. I've been in industry almost 40 years myself, primarily on the solution provider side, and the last 15 years on the industrial nonprofit side. So I enjoy spending time getting various points of view on conversations like we're doing here today, where we're going to be talking about from problem to solution, challenges manufacturers face when choosing technologies. And we are joined by Scott Phillips, who is the founder of i4IQ and a longtime friend and advocate, and really excited to have him here with us today. Scott, by way of background, Scott's had a corporate career with Comerica Bank, Whirlpool, and Therma-Tru Doors before spending the last 10 years advising manufacturers regarding advanced technologies. Over time, Scott has been in roles that include developing, marketing, selling, purchasing, and implementing technology with manufacturing organizations. And his passion is helping small to medium-sized manufacturers develop their Industry 4.0 roadmap. And so we're going to dig in here shortly. I would just encourage everybody that if you are with us on LinkedIn, please, if you have questions for Scott or reactions to any of the conversations, please go ahead and put them into the comments box, and we will do our best to answer them and integrate them into the conversation. So welcome, Scott. Thanks for being here today.
Thanks, Mike. I'm glad to be here. Thanks for the invitation. I'm looking forward to it.
Of course.
That's great. And again, thanks, Scott and Mike. So just to jump right in, Scott. So I think one of the things that what I know about you is you spent the last several years at the Industry 4.0 Accelerator in Michigan. Pretty big operation there. Can you share a little bit about the Accelerator and what it's accomplished in those last several years?
Yeah, sure. So about 5 years ago, the state of Michigan started an Industry 4.0 Accelerator. And I was part of that program. I was the program manager for a group called the Industry 4.0 Accelerator. We had other organizations involved, Automation Alley, our MEP affiliate, and so forth. But basically, it's an economic development mission. The state had two goals. One was to make sure that all Michigan manufacturers were aware of and adopting advanced technologies so that we were globally competitive. State of Michigan, the MEDC, which is the economic development, really wanted to make sure that Michigan manufacturers understood advanced technology, Industry 4.0 technology. And the second economic development goal was to attract solution providers to Michigan. So when we weren't talking to manufacturers about their problem, we were vetting a lot of technology from around the globe, probably about 200 solutions a year. And when we would find something in Silicon Valley or Israel or Turkey or wherever it was, our second economic development mission was to get them to Michigan, to have either a presence, an office, a relationship or something. So it was really a twofold economic development mission.
That's a really important dynamic or relationship between the manufacturers and the solution providers. So you playing that matchmaker role, especially vetting 200 solutions a year, that's pretty impressive. Can you maybe talk a little bit about that? Were these established companies, new companies? What was sort of the criteria that got you started?
Yeah. So when we started, there was just two or three of us doing these vetting calls when we would come across companies, and then we got a little more systematic about it, about having relationships around the globe to find advanced technologies. Typically, when we're working for a manufacturer that's an established manufacturer, they do not want early stage or pre-seed type technology. They want something that's pretty mature and proven. So most of the technologies we saw were, an A series or B series or an established, even if they weren't fundraising, they were more established. If our client was on the venture capital side of GM or Ford or one of the manufacturers, they wanted to see earlier things because they were looking at investing. But most of what we looked at was mid to later stage startups.
Excellent. Well, thank you for that.
So tangibly then, can you talk about some of the tangible accomplishments from the Accelerator in those last 5 years or so?
Yeah. The goal when the program first started 5 years ago, Michigan has 13,000 manufacturers, of course, many of them small. And the goal was to touch, we called it touch, I think it was 7,000 of them over the 5 years. And what that meant was we got them to an event or got them on a webinar or brought them somewhere so that they got some education about Industry 4.0, what the opportunities were, how to proceed. And we did achieve that goal. Basically, there was about 7,000 manufacturers over 5 years that were in a CRM system we collected that the program touched.
Wow. Well, that's great news because I think one of the things we continue to, it's one reason we're here on this broadcast today. As an example, it's to reach out to these manufacturers to provide information and help them, educate them, and really help them learn and understand where Industry 4.0 can help them achieve their business goals. So it's great to hear that you made that kind of progress in Michigan.
I would just add, Mike, that it's not easy to do that. And I think people in other states, you all would know the same thing. I mean, getting these manufacturers out of their business, if they're small on a day-to-day business, when they're running the business, it's not easy to get them someplace to an event or somewhere where they can make the time. So, getting 6,000 people somewhere over 5 years was a big effort.
Yeah.
I just want to let that soak in for a second for folks, because I'm not sure that people get that how much work that is. I mean, that kind of scale to reach 6,000 companies is huge. It's quite an accomplishment. Typically it's, people are talking in the dozens, right? When you're running programs and connecting with people. So kudos to all of you for that kind of reach.
Yeah, and I would give credit to the state of Michigan because the way they structured the program, the local economic development organizations by city and area were involved, and they had money to provide demo money and for demo projects. So there was a lot of elements to this that made it attractive for even the small mediums to get involved.
Excellent. Well, I definitely like to jump into more of that and the structure and stuff, but why don't we make sure we hit the topics here and take a step back, right? We're focused on what the challenges are for manufacturers, and maybe just one finer point from a credibility perspective for Scott. I think that the state of Michigan, the folks that pulled you in, were very fortunate to have someone with your grounded experience in manufacturing to play that role. So just because you build a program doesn't mean that somebody can take it out and represent it well. So Scott has a fantastic background grounded in manufacturing principles, and so that's a big deal. So walking into a manufacturer or talking to a manufacturer, Scott, I'm sure you can relate with their environment, their pressures, et cetera. So what do you see as the primary challenges that manufacturers are facing?
So when it comes to technology adoption, I would say I would bucket them into three big challenges, somewhat dependent on their size and sophistication, but and these are all big issues. The top one is identifying technology or scouting it and just knowing what current state of the art even is. There is so much Industry 4.0 hardware and software technology around the world. Sure. So just having vision to what the current state of the art or current art of the possible, that's the first challenge. And the second challenge is evaluating or down selecting. So even if you have a good funnel and vision, what's really hard these days are to categorize, compare, and contrast. I call it the 3 C's. So which 2 or 3 companies are even in the same category? What's the category names these days? Because it's evolving and changing. So,
Sure.
I mean, most, even as sophisticated as Whirlpool and GM and Ford, the advanced manufacturing tech people, when they came to us, they trusted us to be the curators of technology. They didn't know whether to match Tulip with Detect It, with Unit X to Wheel Me, right? I mean, it's really hard even for the smartest technology people out there. So we became kind of the curators to know, who do you compare and what is the basis of comparison and how do these two solutions contrast? So the second, I would say, was evaluation. And then the third, and maybe the hardest one, is implementation.
Sure.
So if you do well through those first 2 hurdles, you've still got to have a POC, a successful POC. And if that proof of concept is successful, you still got to expand and scale and integrate it into your legacy systems. So if you throw that all under the area of implementation, again, the 3 areas were scouting technology, evaluating technology, and implementing it. And I think they're all really hard.
Right. And I think, is it safe to say also that is there a typical time frame it would take for someone to move through that process? Right. Because if you're going to be actively engaged with people that are ready to implement, there's probably an order of magnitude more people that are in the evaluation stage, and order of magnitude beyond that are back at the scouting stage. So how long do you typically see it taking that kind of time frame?
Well, I think, it depends a lot on the size of the organization. I know I keep saying that, but if you're at a small to even a mid-sized manufacturer, 500 employees or 1,000 employees, they've maybe got 2 or 3 process engineers or industrial engineers. And if you're those people, you have only limited time. I mean, you're keeping existing processes and equipment running.
Mm-hmm.
You have only so much time to do those other 3 things: scout technology, evaluate it, and implement it. And so the real problem you have, when you ask how long does it take, if you're large and sophisticated and you've got dedicated resources that are doing these things, you could move through it, depending on what it is, in 6 months to 9 months, a thorough evaluation. But when you're a small, medium company, it seems to take forever, because on any given day, you're doing something different. You're never focused on just these 3 things.
Right.
That's so true. But given that, then going back to your first point about knowing about technology, how does it, when we talk even a smaller company that doesn't even have the number of people you just described, where do they go to learn? Where do they go to get to understand the technology that's out there? How would you suggest they handle that? Because we see the same thing as you mentioned it. How does a small manufacturer who's focused on the day-to-day know how to go get this information so that they can actually think about it? What are your experiences there?
Yeah. Well, let's go back to Michigan, those 13,000 manufacturers. I think 85% of them are 50 people and less, and 90% of them are 25 people and less.
Mm-hmm.
So back to the point you just made, Mike, that owner operator is working in the business every day. Their bandwidth is limited, their financial resources are limited, and their skill sets are limited in their team. So I would say that the average manufacturer is probably doing, I would group it this way: they're looking at their suppliers, their vendors, and their customers. As far as that's about as far as they can go to see what new technology is out there. If they happen to be a tier 2 or tier 1 supplier to a large company, that's probably where they're seeing new technology. Now, when you get a little more sophisticated and you have more resources, you're going to trade shows and reading trade publications. And then when you get very sophisticated and have the resources, you have people dedicated to this. But I would say, by and large, a majority of them are simply, if they have a need, they're asking their existing suppliers, vendors, and customers.
And how do you see those conversations going? You mentioned a moment ago, even like the terminology that people are using to define solution spaces and things like that. Do you find that the solution providers that have applications or solutions to deliver speak clearly and have very well defined value proposition and understand the fit, or how much is I guess inefficient in the process of getting them to understand each other?
Yeah, I'm really laughing at your question, Mike, because I would say the biggest insight I had over the 3 years doing this was just how poor many new solution providers are at product positioning and communication and marketing communication. I mean, to go on their website and try to understand what use cases or problems they're solving is like, you got to be a forensic scientist,
Yeah.
right? Everybody is in an AI platform that's low code, no code. And you could read all the gobbledygook on the landing page and really never know what industry they're in, what problem they're solving, or what use cases they're focused on. So part of our vetting was getting these people on the phone and really grilling them on what their sweet spot was, because their marketing communication, especially their websites, are just worthless almost, to be honest.
Yeah. And well, I'm glad you said that, because I could have said that in a statement instead of a question, and because that's been my experience as well. And as I mentioned, I'm a recovering solution provider, so I don't have an issue saying how difficult that challenge is. And it's a shame too, because the solution providers are an integral part of a manufacturer's growth and success and such, and they very likely have they do solve problems, right? There's value to what they do. And so it is really hard, I think, to get over that issue that you raised.
I would just add, everything you just said is correct. What I would add to that is, imagine you're a small startup in Sweden and you've got a solution that is a fit for the US. From product positioning and marketing standpoint, first of all, your context for language has to totally shift. The way manufacturing and value chains in the US are different than Europe or Asia. And so then secondly, imagine that you have an investment or an investor behind you. That investor does not want you to pigeonhole yourself into a beachhead market, which is exactly what you should be doing.
What you have to do,
right? But so now you've got language and translation issues, you've got investor pressures, and then on top of that, since you're small, you're probably pretty poor at marketing communications.
Yeah.
You add all that together, and the user is just going to be lost trying to figure out what you do.
Yeah, and that's a shame. I mean, historically, I'm sorry, Mike, I'm sort of steamrolling, but just one final point. I mean, historically, as solutions were built with like system integrators and SIs could be another topic we come back to a little bit later. There's long-term commitments and relationships built regionally, right? And like you're talking about with that example, somebody coming into the States, somebody that's backed by investors, they want logos, they want to keep growing, they want to keep expanding. Yeah. And that really sort of flies in the face of at least the history of how technology used to be adopted and done in a partnership, and I guess more transactional, lighter touch from that support perspective. At least that's the expectation. So do you see, I guess, is that another one of the challenges, like how people get the support of the vendors short and long term?
Yeah, so many of these are software startups, especially if they're coming from overseas. And so I'll use predictive maintenance, right? There's probably 1,000 people in India that think they have a predictive maintenance algorithm that nobody else has in manufacturing. What they don't know is that their target customer has no data infrastructure, right? So that company in India thinks they're going to get a SQL data set, and that's all that there is, and they just got to plug into it. So unless you have the system integrator or the value chain partner on the ground, a lot of these point solutions are really pie in the sky, to be honest.
Well, what's interesting about what you described there is, almost an ecosystem that manufacturers have to rely on in order to be successful. So you talked about the Michigan Accelerator. Certainly, that's one part of the ecosystem, a reliable partner, if you will. We talk about integrators. So there's a lot of people that get involved in the ecosystem in order to really support a small and mid-sized manufacturer.
Yep.
in this journey. And I think, you know, what's kind of neat about it when you hear about like what the state of Michigan did with the accelerator is there's ways that government can not do it, if you will. I'm kind of saying do it, but provide resources to the infrastructure, the ecosystem that can be built around small and mid-sized manufacturing.
Yeah.
I think that's really interesting because we talk about today a lot, or we get into, you know, how what's the level government should be involved in helping make stuff like this go. And I think most people believe in a light touch, and I think that's kind of what we're thinking about here. When at least that's what I think about when I think about the accelerator and the things we're talking about.
Yeah. I think when Michigan started, they were probably on the forefront, you know, back 5 years ago. But since then, Indiana has programs like this. I'm sure Ohio does, and probably half the states in the U.S. have something. And it's a bit of an experiment still about what they should be contributing, you know, whether it's grants or money or things like that. But you're seeing more states put their toe in the water for sure.
Yeah,
it's interesting. What I see in the states that I work with, the localities that I work with, is that there's a lack of an understanding of the process that you articulated, right? So just getting a manufacturer to the point where they've accepted that they either need or they want to pursue technology. There's a whole bunch of work that has to happen there.
Yeah.
And that's really where the club fits, right? We're trying to nurture those conversations and give people a space where they can hear from others and they can you know, sort of go through that awareness and understanding and acceptance. Then you get into that the work that you talked about with the 3 different phases you talked about of actually getting to the point of adoption or implementation. And a lot of the programs, I think, are a lot of the people that are from outside of manufacturing build a program that's focused on adoption, right? Without understanding all of the work and the phases that have to happen up in advance. So did you see, and I agree with you. I mean, certainly the state of Michigan was at the forefront of this. Did they give you free reign to sort of build out to where you are, or did they build the process, the program from scratch, and you just plugged into how they?
Yeah, no, they had some parameters about the structure of the program, the activities they wanted to see. Like I say, the Accelerator Automation Alley and MMTC, which is our MEP affiliate in Michigan, we were the 3 statewide service providers, and then we worked with the local economic development groups who had the money and the budget for demos and trials and things like that. So they put the right pieces in place. I'll give you an example. The state of Michigan would not cover system integrators as part of a solution, whereas Indiana did. Right. And that was really a significant difference because for all the reasons you just said, it's really hard for a small medium without the help of an integrator sometimes to not only get it installed, but then stick around for the training and the fine tuning and the tweaking and all that.
For sure.
So I want to kind of segue or move to another topic we can talk about for a minute. So, you know, we often hear about the term pilot purgatory, and you know, it's companies who try something in a particular area, but never get beyond the trial. Have you seen folks that have had that problem? And how? Really, I'm sure you have. But how does a manufacturer avoid being stuck in pilot purgatory?
Yeah, it's a real challenge, and it's a very common situation, like you said, Mike. I'll give you an example of a mid-market tier 1 supplier in automotive that we worked with quite a bit. I won't name them, but just one facility they had, which was about a 1,000-employee facility, they took an inventory at one time of all the solutions that were out on the floor, and it was 150. And they were pretty sure they were missing quite a few. Wow. And so back to your question, you know, I would say you have to have a plan, as silly as that sounds, whether that's a roadmap, if you want to call it a roadmap or a plan. But if the engineers and operators on the floor have free reign to go, you know, do those 3 things I said on their own for point solutions for their area or their assembly area, then you're going to have a lot of pilot purgatory. Because if you don't have a roadmap that's helping you think about the level of automation you want in the plant and the kind of competencies you got to have, then you're you're never going to have structured implementation. So long story short, I would just say, and I don't recommend any particular plan. There's a lot of them out there, but just have a plan. I mean, have a roadmap, have an assessment, have something that provides a guardrail for all the people to have free reign out on the floor.
Well, I think too, to go with that, a lot of times when you finish, I mean, that plan really has to include a couple things. One, it's when we're successful, what's next?
Yeah.
Right. So, how do we expand it? How is it going to be developed? Or two, when we're not successful, are we going to take it out?
Yep.
So sometimes because sometimes we're partially successful and go, well, so we think about it. We don't know how to go back or go forward. We're stuck.
That's right.
And so I think there's a couple things that you really got to consider when you build that plan to ensure you don't get 150 different solutions on the floor that don't talk to one another.
And the other thing I would add, I agree with everything you said, Mike, is I've seen so many manufacturers, mostly small and medium, try to introduce automation that is above and beyond their current process control capabilities. I mean, if you don't have basic, whether it's a CPK, if you want to think of it that way, but if your core processes in your plant or your plant wide aren't under process control, the odds you're going to successfully deploy a new technology get very slim. And I don't think enough manufacturers think of that. That if they aren't under process control to begin with, that should be your focus. That and lean should be your focus. You don't want to automate wasteful processes and poorly controlled processes.
Yeah, I just want to step back 1 second to the path Mike was going down, because when I started working more regionally, I uncovered another scenario, as Mike was just talking about, as far as people that were looking to put a solution in place, prove that it works, and then once they solve the problem, take it out, which was completely mind-boggling to me, right? Because to your point about controlling the process, like once you use a solution and you get to the level of performance you want, then you can continue to progress it and make it. But the idea was, well, we'll use this for a little while, we'll get the value out of it, and then we'll turn it off.
Yeah.
And I think about it from a solution provider perspective, like that's a horrible business model, right? Like you're completely hosed if you get a one-shot deal and then people throw you out after you've proven you're successful.
Yeah, I agree with that. If I had to categorize all the solutions I've seen over 5 years, I would say they all do one of three things. They monitor, optimize, or control something. And I mean, that's overly simplistic, but if it's hard to optimize a process if you can't even monitor it to begin with, whether that's vision systems or a real-time solution, tagging solutions or whatever. And it's not worth optimizing something if you can't control it when you get it into a better state.
Right.
So it's really important that you monitor and optimize, and you have to be able to control.
So just want to remind everybody that if you have questions for Scott, we're talking with Scott Phillips, the founder of i4IQ, and long-term advocate for helping manufacturers understand the role and the value and the fit of technologies. So if you have questions, please go ahead. We've been talking for almost 30 minutes now already. But Scott, I wanted to take a step back too, because to your point about having a plan, having a roadmap, et cetera, I know you've spent a lot of time, you have tools. Maybe talk just a little bit about what i4IQ is and what you do and how people can plug in there for resources.
Yeah, sure. So with the program essentially winding down this year, it's been 5 years and the funding will end at the end of this year. So what I've done is taken the time I now have, and I'm trying to essentially automate what I've learned in 3 to 4 years into a chatbot-like piece of software. So basically, I'm building what's called a graph rag. I'm not a technical expert, but it's a large language model combined with a knowledge graph. And that knowledge graph combines all I've learned over 3 or 4 years about the types of questions and things and considerations you need to have. And essentially, it will bring back. It's gonna have a database of several thousand solutions from around the world. Yeah. But it'll essentially walk you through a chat about what problems you're trying to solve and use cases. And eventually, where it will end up is a down selection and evaluation of some solutions you should consider. So I'm basically trying to automate what we did manually for 3 to 4 years.
You're making a Scott bot.
I'm making a Scott bot. I never thought of that.
That's great. No, thanks for sharing that, Scott. I'm excited to see where that goes and what value add it can provide for manufacturers. That sounds really interesting.
Yeah, it's under coding right now. I got a small grant here locally, and it's being coded up. It'll be ready for some testing in early February if anybody wants to see it.
And you have, is your website i4iq.com? It
is i4iq.org. And it's a bit of a sandbox right now because the tool's still being built out. But yes, it's i4iq.org.
Okay. And we don't often ask people to come on here and tout themselves and such, but I'll just tell everybody that working with Scott for several years, he has tons of experience and the right mission and has offered up his understanding and his tools, for the benefit of the community. So I think it's a great resource, and I would certainly recommend people go follow Scott on LinkedIn, check out the webpage, all those sorts of things.
Absolutely. Happy to help anybody in any way I can. So
as we've talked for the last 30 minutes, Scott, Mike, so as we get ready to wrap up, we always try to end our broadcast with final thoughts. Maybe let you start, Mike, and then Scott, wrap up to you, if you don't mind. Mike, you want to go ahead?
Sure. Lots of things go through my head, and probably what I would lean into here is sort of the juxtaposition of, we ended talking about a Scott bot, even though I just created that term, but the use of AI, the use of technology, et cetera, to help people through this process. That's all built on decades of experience that Scott represents here, right? And a willingness to share that information and stuff. So the takeaway for me is this is really a great, it's not a juxtaposition. It's a great visual to see the old and the new. And I think you put the new on top of the old or in combination with the old. I'm not calling you old, Scott. It's not what I mean. But the experience, the understanding, you talked about lean, you talked about process control, right? You talked about the core tenets of manufacturing, and then these tools can come support that. And I think everybody's seeing that today in this conversation, and it's really, really powerful. And I hope people get that as a takeaway from today.
Yep, absolutely agree with that, Mike. And I guess what I would end on is two thoughts, one for the manufacturer, one for the solution providers. For the manufacturers, like we've said already in this call, have a plan. Like Mike Ungar said, if you don't have a plan going into implementation and you don't know what you're going to do, depending on whether that implementation is successful or not, then you're going to be in POC purgatory forever. You're just going to be trying something. You'll be like a whack-a-mole. So my advice to the manufacturing users is have a plan. And my advice to the solution providers is really get clear on your product positioning and your marketing messaging, because you're not going to hit your goals and you're not doing any manufacturers any favor if you just say you can do everything for everybody.
Wonderful. Well, thanks. I'd like to thank Scott and Mike for joining us, and Scott for sharing his insights into the application and really how to apply technology in manufacturing with success, if you will. So the club, the Industry 4.0 Club, would like to encourage you to take some actions. Advance the deployment of Industry 4.0, read an article, attend a workshop, develop a smart manufacturing roadmap, develop a plan, or encourage your company to do the same. We'd love to hear about what you're doing to help advance the implementation of Industry 4.0. So drop us a note on our website at www.industry40club.com or on our website, or on our LinkedIn page. Along the same lines, we do these broadcasts weekly. And if you'd like to be on one of these broadcasts and share your perspective on an interesting topic, we'd be happy to host you. And again, let us know either by visiting our website or our LinkedIn page. So with that, gentlemen, thank you so much for the time today, and we wish you a good rest of the day and a good rest of the week.
Great. Same to you, Mike.
Excellent. Thank you, gentlemen. Take care.